Confession time here. Those of us who work in journalism often look askance at members of our so-called profession who decide to trade in their reporter's notebook for politics. I mean, don't journalists have the best jobs? And why would someone want to leave that for politics, a profession even more disrespected than journalism? Well, let's ask the new mayor of Canada's capital city, Mark Sutcliffe, who joins us from his office at Ottawa City Hall. Your Worship, it's great to meet you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I love the way you frame that, Steve. And listen, it's great to be on your show, having watched you for so many years. So it's a pleasure to join you. Thank you for the opportunity.
We should just tell people, even though you and I were sort of in the same game for a long time, we don't know each other. We've never met. This is the first time I think we're ever having a conversation. So why don't we start off where I just left off in that intro, which is, I well remember you. I used to watch you on CPAC, the cable public affairs channel, all the time. And I wonder, why is this guy giving up a really good gig for the vagaries of politics?
It's a great question. And, you know, I had a wonderful career as a broadcaster and columnist and journalist, and also a separate career on the side sometimes, and sometimes full-time as an entrepreneur. I started some newspapers and magazines and was involved in other businesses. And I had a great life, and this wasn't really in the plans. In fact, a year ago, if you and I had met at that time and talked about my future, none of this would have been in the plans. But I've always cared very deeply about my community. I've lived my whole life in Ottawa, and my parents were immigrants to Canada, and Ottawa was very good to them. And so I've always cared very much about the community. I've volunteered a lot. I've chaired boards of not-for-profit organizations. And so I care a lot about the city and about the future. And there was an election campaign that was underway, and there were a lot of people asking for someone else to step into the race who represented what they thought was in the best interest of the community. And people approached me, and I originally said no. And then I finally decided if I could make a difference in my city and this was the way to do it, then I should give it a shot.
I thought the unusual thing about your move was that you are so, or at least you were so, associated with federal politics, given the job that you previously had. So I'm not shocked you got into politics. I'm a little surprised you got into municipal politics. Why'd you go that route?
Well, again, I'm an Ottawa guy. I've lived my whole life here in this city, and I was involved very much in local issues in the community. I did cover local politics as well for a long time on the radio and as a newspaper columnist. And so I care very deeply about the future of this city. I've always tried to be a champion for the city and for the most vulnerable in the community, for small business owners, and for the future of our great capital city. So it just seemed to make sense, and it was the right time, I guess, for me and for the city.
We have an impression of politics from the outside that presumably you now from the inside can tell us what really goes on that we on the outside don't really appreciate. So I know it's only been half a year, but what have you learned about how things really work on the inside?
One of the first things I would say, Steve, is, you know, I realize now how little I knew often when I was writing as a columnist about some issues. It's, you know, and I think it's important to know that the public and members of the media understand the issues at a very high level, and that's natural. We're not expecting members of the public, frankly, nor the media, to have as much knowledge as about an issue as the people who are working every single day on that file. So I've learned a lot in the last 6 months about the many different issues that the city of Ottawa is grappling with going forward. And I've certainly learned what it's like to be on the other side of the microphone and what it's like to be interviewed. And yeah, so it's been a real learning experience, and it's very different in many ways from journalism and from broadcasting. But I would say in one way it's the same in that it is all about how you are presenting to the community the issues that are important. And so in some ways I feel my job hasn't changed a lot, because my job is to talk about what's important to members of the community, to frame the issues in a way that they will understand, and to help them together with City Council make decisions about the future of our community.
I want to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to put up a picture. And here comes the picture. This is you on swearing-in day with the chain of office around your neck. How was that?
It was very special. You know, as I've said many times, I think you can see there, I look a little bit emotional and very grateful. And I think about my mother's family who moved to Ottawa from China. They escaped the Communist Revolution in the 1950s and moved to Canada to start over. And they came to Ottawa, and it was an opportunity for them. They were able to find jobs, and my mother and her sisters went to university here, and had careers and started families. And so, you know, when I think about them arriving in Ottawa with almost nothing and starting their lives over, the fact that my grandparents one day could think that their grandson would be the mayor of this city is really special. And I think about my dad, who moved here when he was 19 years old from the north of England. He'd never been outside the United Kingdom before, and moved to Ottawa and started his life here. My late father, who, you know, I know he'd be surprised and proud to see his son as the mayor of Ottawa, and to be the mayor of my hometown, the city that I've lived my whole life in, is just an extraordinary honor.
Nice. How much does the current mayor want to know from the previous mayor?
Well, Jim Watson was my immediate predecessor as mayor, and I've spoken to him several times since the election. And when I have questions, he's available to me, and he's supported me with information and his thoughts on the issues. But I'm fortunate that I can rely on an amazing team here at the City of Ottawa. There's a lot of continuity with the senior staff at the city, and there are some people on my team who have worked at the city for a long time. So there are great people here. It's a large organization with a high level of expertise throughout the organization, but also especially in the senior roles. So I'm relying on the terrific people who work at the City of Ottawa, who devote their lives every day to making the city stronger and better, and who really care about the future of our city.
Now, Jim Watson was obviously the mayor when the convoy hit town, but now, of course, that is your responsibility, and if anything like that were to happen again, you'd be the guy, or at least one of the guys, on the hot seat. And I guess we need to know whether or not you feel, based on what you know and what you've asked around about, is Ottawa better prepared now to handle some future disaster?
Absolutely. I think a huge number of lessons have been learned from the convoy itself, from the public inquiry. I think the city and the police department and the RCMP and Parliamentary Protective Services have been engaged in many conversations, and there are much different plans in place. And I think we've already seen evidence of that, Steve. I think if you look at some of the other events that have happened in the past year, where people have attempted to repeat the convoy of February 2022, they have not been successful in taking over downtown Ottawa. They've been diverted away, or the roads have been blocked so that they're not able to get into the downtown core. Obviously, we are always ready in Ottawa as the nation's capital for peaceful, lawful protests and demonstrations, people walking through the streets of downtown Ottawa and onto Parliament Hill. But we don't ever want to see the events of February 2022 repeated in downtown Ottawa again.
No, this was the great conundrum, is that because Ottawa is a unique city in the country, the police's responsibility, the city council's responsibility, the RCMP's responsibility, the protective services responsibility, there just seemed to be a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram, and not everybody knew what everybody was responsible for. Are you clear in your mind right now that if you know what hit the fan tomorrow, everybody would know what to do?
I believe that's true. I think there have been a lot of lessons learned, and I think one of the most important lessons was about communication. And there are multiple jurisdictions at play here, obviously, and that's always going to be the case in a city like Ottawa. We have the wonderful opportunity of being the nation's capital, and there's so many great things that go with that. We have wonderful museums. It's a great place to visit, and we have tourists coming from all over the world to see Ottawa. So being the nation's capital is a tremendous honor and opportunity for our city, but there are some responsibilities that go with that as well. And having our local police force that is paid for through property taxes locally, having the additional responsibility of policing the nation's capital and dealing with events like those that occurred last year, that is an additional burden for the City of Ottawa. we're in regular conversations with the federal government about what that means and how we can support each other. But communication is critically important. So we have to make sure that that is paramount in whenever any future events happen.
I think you are unique in the province right now. You won't be after June 26th, but you are right now the only mayor out of 444 municipalities in the province with so-called strong mayor powers. Now, I know when you campaigned for office, you said you didn't intend to use them, but can you foresee any set of circumstances where you might want to and or need to use those powers?
I don't foresee those circumstances. One of the things I said during the campaign is that I intend to work closely and collaboratively with the democratically elected city council. And we've started off really well working together. There were some tensions and divisions in the final few years of the last term of council, but I think we've done a really good job of collaborating and cooperating, and there's some evidence of that already. Our first budget was passed last month unanimously, which is a rare event in Ottawa. So we're working together. We're collaborating, we're achieving consensus, and I don't think that I will, I don't agree in principle with the idea of me overriding the will of council, the will of a democratically elected council, and I don't intend to use those powers. I think we're going to be able to work very well together to get things done.
One of the things I suspect you've already learned on the job is that you really need the province on side for so much of what you may want to do, despite the fact that I think the city of Ottawa has a population comparable to probably 6 out of 10 provinces in the country. Should it be that way?
I don't know if it should be that way, Steve, but it is that way. So we have to work with what we've got. It is interesting, I've learned. I always knew this, obviously, but I've learned just how much impact there is from the fact that municipalities are creatures of the province and have very limited means to generate additional revenue and so many things that we're mandated to deliver. So a big part of the job is working with other levels of government, the federal government and the provincial government. And a big part of the job is asking for their help and support, and in particular financial support, to deliver what we need to the community. So I'm fortunate that I have a very good relationship with Premier Doug Ford and his cabinet and his government. And I also have a very good relationship with the Prime Minister, with Justin Trudeau's cabinet and with his government and with the local MPs. So I intend to work very closely with them to make sure that Ottawa always gets its fair share of funding and that we are collaborating on the key issues and that the city is able to deliver to its residents what it needs to in areas like homelessness and housing and transit and safety and security and so much more.
Let's finish up on this. Can you complete this sentence, please? My time as mayor of Ottawa, however long it lasts, will have been worth it if I can, what?
If I can make life better for all Ottawa residents, if I can make Ottawa safer, more reliable, and more affordable. We're going through an affordability crisis right now in our community, like so many others. We've had some issues of reliability of city services, including transit. We want to fix those, and we want to make sure Ottawa is a safer and more prosperous community. So we're focused on economic development and on revitalizing downtown Ottawa and the Byward Market, the historic Byward Market that's about to turn 200 years old in a few years. So I want to make life better for everyone in Ottawa, not just a select few, but make sure that we are growing our city in a sustainable way, in a way that benefits all Ottawa residents.
I'm curious as to what your reaction was the first time somebody said, "Hey, Your Worship," and they meant you.
I'm still getting used to that. It's not a title that I like a whole lot. I don't even really have an affinity for that chain of office that you showed me wearing in a picture. I think that's the only time I've actually worn it, maybe one other time as well. But I'm not a fancy titles kind of person, so I'm adjusting to the fact that people have a tendency to not call me Mark anymore. That's been probably one of the biggest adjustments that I've had, Steve.
And I'm not going to do it either because you're the mayor now. So I'm going to say, Your Worship, Mayor Sutcliffe, it's been great having you on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
It's been my pleasure, Steve. Thank you so much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.